What's up everybody, and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the all-new 2023 BMW M2. Could this car replace my brand new Toyota Supra? Now, about 2 months or so ago, I bought the new manual Toyota Supra, 2023 model year obviously, and I have been a big fan of the M2 for several years. I've driven quite a few of them over the last few years, and the new one is a car that really stands out to me, and I've really been enjoying it alongside the Supra for the time being. So we're going to talk kind of about these two, how they compare, and basically would the M2 be the next step, because they have very similar power plants, drivetrains. Obviously they're both built by BMW. You got the twin turbo motor, a little bit more power, and obviously the biggest thing is the practicality in the M2. It's a super usable car, but you still get a lot of the fun factor from the Supra. So I feel like the M2, honestly, when the time comes, will be the perfect next step to go from a nice small two-seat sports car and then get pretty much the same thing with that manual transmission, but now in a car that has all the practicality you could need. And as you can tell, we got the GTR in the background, kind of like a car in between the Supra and GTR. Kind of gives you that practicality of a GTR, but gives you that rear-wheel drive manual transmission fun factor that I love in the Toyota Supra. So we're going to take a quick look at the interiors of both cars. So just go ahead and hop inside this one. So of course we have a lot more technology actually in the BMW. You can even get crazy bucket seats that are even nicer than these ones, which I love the colors. But you get that new curved display, a little bit more refinements and things like that. And then over in the Supra, it's kind of the older BMW. Obviously we're all pretty familiar with what the Mark V Supra is all about. And in here, I mean, it's still a pretty refined BMW interior. However, it's just a little bit more simple in here with the older school materials from older BMWs. Now, as far as sitting on the interior, the POV look of sitting in a Toyota Supra, you got smaller glass, it's a little bit more hunkered down, and visibility is decent. However, that seat pillar is huge back there. So it's a little on the small side when you're sitting in here, daily driving it, things like that. Touching everything in here, it feels nice. You got some carbon fiber, of course, manual transmission. So not a bad look. And then on the BMW, you have a much larger windshield, as you can tell. The windows are huge, that rear glass is ginormous, and you have such good visibility when looking in here. So you can tell it's a much more practical, usable car than the Supra is. Just really good visibility. And of course, a really nice interior, more carbon, even bigger screen. So just kind of the next step up as far as a premium car goes. So hopping in the M2 to drive it around. So the main thing why I would pick the M2 to replace the Toyota Supra when the time comes to where I want a practical manual sports car, basically because I don't think there's anything else that quite exists. Obviously I could get a Mustang that has, you know, the V8 and a manual transmission, an M4, a little bit more expensive, few other cars on the list, but quite honestly nothing really is a direct competition. The M2 costs just about the same. It's about $5,000 or $6,000 more expensive than my Supra, so not really all too big of a deal. And with that extra price point, you do get a nicer interior. It's a little bit more refined. You got some fancier technology and things like that. You also get about 50 more horsepower, which honestly really shows. In the higher RPM above 4,000, this car really starts to take off. Gosh. And the brakes are bigger. They actually feel a little bit better than the Supras. So this has a lot of meat to it, a lot of performance and power. And with the availability of a 6-speed manual, you can still have that fun factor that the Supra has. The Supra is just a blast for purely a sports car, purely the fun aspects. I will say there are some sacrifices. And obviously if you're going from a 2-seater car and you're trying to get a more practical version of it, you're gonna sacrifice some of the fun factor. Toyota's manual is significantly better, I'd say, than BMW's. Now I know they're both technically BMWs, but Toyota took the BMW Z4 4-cylinder manual transmission, completely renovated, completely rebuilt it to their own specs and everything, and it shows. It is a completely different feeling transmission. Some people in the comments have said it's just a BMW transmission. You probably haven't driven one back to back with a BMW. They are significantly different, and the Toyota is just so notchy, so precise. The clutch pedal has good feedback. This is a bad manual transmission. I've been in much worse. This is a really good transmission overall, but the Toyota transmission is a step up in just, wow, this is nice. So I'm really, really impressed with what Toyota did to that transmission to really just make it crazy good to drive. So you're gonna sacrifice that. At the same time, I can almost see that not being the worst case, because this car is more practical, more of a daily drivable type of car, to where you almost kind of would want it to be a little bit more forgiving. It's a little bit easier to drive, a little bit lighter clutch. So it's almost maybe a good thing that this is a little toned down, to where this is a manual transmission car that doesn't have to be. But when you're driving this car with the 6-speed, it's not like it's that much work. It's a very easy to drive manual. It's nicer than just an economy car manual, like, you know, Acura Integra, Toyota GR 86, stuff on that level. So it's kind of a middle of the road, pretty good transmission. But, you know, if you're gonna be dailying this, using it all the time, I guess we could forgive the car just because it does make it a little bit easier to use. The Supra's isn't a hard transmission to use. It's just, it takes a little more muscle to it, and it's just a little bit more engaging. So you gotta kind of pay attention a little bit more. We're talking, you know, not crazy amount. If you know how to drive manual, you can drive either car. But then I'd say the only other sacrifice going from this, from a Supra, is the fact that it's not quite as nimble. And again, it weighs 400 pounds more. It's got those back seats. You know, you can only do so much when you add practicality and size to a vehicle. With that said, in the Sport Plus mode, you know, back to back, the Supra handles better, but when you're just driving this, you're not gonna drive this and think it doesn't handle really, really well. So flat in the turns, so good around the corners, the brakes are insane. You're not really sacrificing much. You're gaining the benefits of extra practicality, and you're in a really, really good performance car at the end of the day, to where you're only going to notice any downfalls with this car when you're comparing it back to back with a car that is more geared towards the performance factor. So, driving the M2, I feel like this is that sweet spot for you own a Supra, own a two-door car, something like that, you know, a manual car comparable with a Supra, and you're ready for something that's more practical, you know, the back seat space, the trunk space. This is the car. I cannot, for the life of me, think of a better car that would end up replacing the Supra. Now, I'm not selling the Supra anytime soon, so don't think that's what this video is about. I just like planning ahead for the future, and I mean, when I get to plan my life around what car I want to buy, that excites me a lot. So I kind of like looking ahead to see what cars are going to work for the next phase of life. And the M2, gosh, I think for me this is the sweet spot. Mike and I were talking about it a little bit. I think he might think of an M4, which the M4 is comparable to my Nissan GTR. It's kind of same performance level. I did a comparison with an M4 and my GTR. This is more online with a Supra, that more a little bit playful, tossable, not quite as powerful and crazy serious. But the fact that this just is that little bit smaller car like a Supra, when you compare an M4 to it, it gives me that fun factor. And I'm really liking this sweet spot of $60,000 cars. I feel like you get a lot for the money, and you really can't go wrong with that. And since we're at it, might as well do a launch control. Pretty fun doing launch in this car. Again, it's not a straight line car. I did about 4.4 seconds, 0 to 60, which isn't too bad. And 60. Not bad, low to mid 4 seconds with a manual. You only have to do one shift, you get about 62, 65 in second gear. So it's a fun car, it's fast. And the only other thing I guess you're sacrificing, there's not quite as much drama when you compare this to the Supra. The Supra, it really gets the adrenaline pumping when you're ripping it through the mountains, through the turns. I mean, that car kind of takes your breath away. It is just pinpointing, everything is so much fun. This car has a little bit more relaxed feeling to it in the stock configuration, to where the modifications, I think, are gonna make this just as fun, just as exhilarating. So to me, that's a really cool thing, to where I can get a car brand new just like this and know that full exhaust intakes and a tune on it, I mean, it's gonna make some noises, it's gonna be even faster. Lowering springs for sure, just to tighten up the suspension a tad. And, you know, this is gonna be a car that has all the drama, and with the manual, you know, it kind of gives you that extra driver engagement, to where you can just have that old school fun with it. But at the end of the day, adults can actually fit in those back seats. I can fit back there with headroom and legroom, even sitting behind myself with this seat at my height. So it's a really good blend of a car, and I would prefer this over the M4 just because this has that smaller and more nimble feeling, just like in the Supra. And price point too, you know, this is about 65 grand. An M4 that I want is gonna be maybe $20,000 more. So this kind of keeps it at that level to where it's not a crazy expensive car. Obviously it's not cheap, but it's a pretty reasonable price point for a very, very nice car. So M2, I've really been enjoying driving this. Mike drove it on a 1,000-mile road trip. He was quite fond of it as well. I've done mountain trip and just kind of played with it around town, using it like I use my Supra. And I can see so much in my Toyota Supra in the new M2. It's just blown up a little bit with the extra practicality, and you get extra power to kind of push this weight. So it's a really good blend between how the two cars compare and contrast to each other. And I don't think there's a better option for when I want to do that. I think my plan, I love the Supra. I am so pumped that I bought that. I still want to get the Nissan Z, but I'm still going to wait, of course, for the Nismo edition. And what I want to do is buy the Nismo alongside the Supra, kind of have them together for maybe like 6 months or so. And this would probably be in a year from now, because obviously the Nissan Z is taking forever to even come out. Still probably wouldn't have had my Z if I had bought one. But if I get the Nismo Z, play with that and the Supra, build them both up crazy, and then sell them both and buy an M2, I think that would be my plan. So Supra, I'll probably own it for 2 years. Hopefully the Nismo Z comes out one day. I can pick that up maybe middle of 2024, own that for the rest of that year, and then 2025, you know, sell both cars after having so much content, so much of a build on each car, bigger turbo on the Supra, doing whatever to the Z. So I think that's kind of my game plan, and then this will be, in a couple years from now, be my tuner car, project car, but it gives me all the fun factor that a Z and a Supra offer. However, I get back seats and trunk space, and I'm sure at that point in life I will probably need the space and practicality, but I still get my manual turbo sports car that I can modify and have a blast. This is what I love doing in cars. I love just ripping around, doing mountain trips, and having a manual in a turbo car that I can modify and completely make my own is a big thing. That's what I really, really like about cars. And the M2 gives you all of that with genuine practicality. So I think that is it then for today's quick video, just playing around with the M2, talking about this is definitely going to be the car that replaces the Supra in a couple years from now. Not getting rid of the Supra anytime soon, but this car is where it's at. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, stay tuned for plenty more content, and comment below for those of you who own a small, you know, not as practical sports car. What car are you planning on in the future when you want all that fun, but you need some practicality? What car would you go for? That is it then. I'll see you all in the next video.